From start to finish, here is how I made Madeline's custom Freeskate dress. The process for making Madeline's custom figure skating dress starts with a couple sketches, and before the sketches, we actually sat down and talked about what she wanted. She gave me a couple inspiration photos, gave me a description, sent me her music, and then I made 3 sketch options, and this is the one she ended up going with. I was really excited about this one because I love the beating that I went with, and when I make sketches, I am just listening to the skaters' music over and over again, and I'm kind of going back and forth between looking at all of the visuals they provided me with and kind of sketching whatever comes to mind in terms of shapes, colors, design, all of that while I'm listening to the music. And when I was listening to Madeline's Freeskate, I really thought of this like unique beading around the neckline, and that was the major inspiration for this design option. She also wanted a deep V in the front, so I just thought that neckline with the beading was super fitting for the music and for what she had asked. I continued a similar beading design for the back because the back was going to be an open V with some straps, and I thought that would just look really symmetrical front and back, which is something that I think for the style she was going for and for her music, it was most fitting in my opinion. Once a skater has selected the design they want to go with, they've approved it, there are no other adjustments or anything that need to be fixed, it's time to find the fabric that I'm going to order that matches this. And obviously for Madeline's dress, it was very easy because it is black. And then I had some nude illusion mesh that matched her skin tone really well, especially from far away. So I did not have to do a lot of digging and searching to find the perfect color match, but I just wanted to film this process for the sake of this video. Next is finding rhinestones, and I will often already have a lot of colors, shapes, and sizes in mind that I want to order for the costume, so this part is pretty simple for me, but I thought I would film it for this video. And sometimes if I have colors on hand or I have one of my color charts, I want to see what it will look like with the fabric I'm purchasing. I'll do kind of what I'm doing here where I'm matching it to the fabric I'm gonna get. After I've done all that, I've made the fabric purchase and the rhinestone order, it is time for me to start making the pattern pieces. And before I make the pattern pieces, I like to write out the measurements in a way that makes sense to my brain because I'm a visual learner. So even though all of my clients will provide me with the sheet of measurements, and in this case, I took Madeline's measurements and wrote them down on the sheet, I then write it again in a way that makes sense while I'm building the pattern, which is why you'll see me sectioning off different areas in certain ways. I also keep this on hand if they purchase any other dresses or costumes for me in the future. Before making the pattern pieces, I am just gonna double check that everything is correct, everything looks good, and I make all of my pattern pieces from scratch, so I am gonna look at the drawing and then I'm gonna compare it to how I'm gonna section off the pattern pieces. In my brain, this makes sense. Out loud, it definitely doesn't. Reviewing all of the footage I have, I completely forgot to video myself making the pattern, so this is me cutting everything out after the pattern is made. I promise I will get better at making these videos and I will show you how I make the pattern pieces. But anyways, this is the process of me cutting everything out. Before cutting everything out, you want to make sure that you are folding your fabric or lining up your fabric in the direction that you want it to be. So you want to make sure if you're cutting things on the fold that you are laying it down the correct way. So this is just me checking the stretch of my fabric, and this is a very stretchy 4-way stretch, but one way has a little more compression than the other, and so I want it to be widthwise the compression way, if that makes sense. And I realize a lot of my dressmaking videos do not make sense because if you're new here or you didn't know, I didn't go to school for fashion design. I was accepted to FIT, FITM, all of these other places, but I actually ended up going to NDSU for visual arts and design, so basically anything under the creative umbrella, mostly because I wanted to be a graphic designer and then eventually a creative director, and the pathway at that school was this, just you doing every single art thing. So a lot of my background is just from those art classes and being like, you make it from scratch, you build it how it is in your brain. I would say the number one thing that college taught me was creative problem solving, and as an art student, I'm sure most of you know that you do not sleep. You are up until 3 a.m., you have maybe a little nap, and then you get up again before your first studio class of the day, and that's usually like mostly before critiques, but critiques happen 1 to 2 times a week, and then you have like 5 classes. So I learned a lot of creative problem solving, and I learned a lot of different medias, everything from sculpture, CAD, printmaking, everything. So that's why with my dressmaking business and all of my accessories, I'm just so interested in trying to do everything by myself as much as possible. Once I've cut out more of my intricate pieces, like the front and back bodice, I always double check to make sure A, I put it to the right stretch, and B, that it is the correct length and depth, and I also factor in the seam allowance needed for each piece. Once I have cut everything out, I will then go back and grab all of the pattern pieces that will need lining. So for this dress, that is going to be the front and back bodice, and that is going to be the front and back underpants. Those of you that have seen my previous figure skating dressmaking videos know that I will use a basting spray to bind the lining to the material that I'm working with, and sometimes if I'm using a stretch Swiss netting, that will also work. It doesn't work the best with nylon or spandex based meshes, so I tend to avoid that and just use it for the pants and the front and back bodice. This part doesn't have to be super precise because you'll see in a minute that I am going to serge the edges and cut off any uneven pieces. The next step, once I have cut everything out, is to bind all of the major pieces together, and I like to serge the edges. I find that this method just works faster for me. I know sometimes I will zigzag the edges together, but for the underpants, I've found that I don't really mind doing a double serged edge for some of these. Once I have serged all of the edges together and the pant is basically fully complete, I go back over with a straight stitch just to close off the edges and make it a little bit more durable. You don't have to do this with the serger, but I am a little bit OCD on those teeny threads pulling through. Once everything is put together and the edges have that little extra stitch I like to put on there, it is time to put in the elastic. There are a couple different ways I do the elastic. I'm using a thicker braided elastic for these pants because I want them to stay snug. So for this one, I am pinning it down to the pant. Sometimes I do this, sometimes I don't, but my machine is a little bit finicky because it's a bit old, so I just prefer to pin it. If it's a softer elastic, I won't really pin it. I'll just eyeball it, pull it, and then once it reaches the end, just overlap it. The reason why you want to wait to do the elastic until after you're done putting the whole pant together is because this is going to look the cleanest once it's finished. This is also going to be the easiest to pull through a serger. This is me serging the elastic into the leg hole of the pants, and what I do for this is I kind of pull very gently on either end, creating some tension, mostly because since I have an old and finicky serger, I don't want any excess getting peeled up over and jammed into the machine. So I want to keep everything flat as possible, but I don't want to pull too much with this one. I'm just going to keep the right amount of tension to make sure that I have a very clean edge. And you can see that it skips some stitches every once in a while because this one is really old, and the cutting knife, I have to replace it all the time because of the materials I'm working with, but this machine itself just has a lot of quirks. Now it is time to finish off our pants and fold over the elastic so you do not see it. So I set mine to a zigzag stitch, and I don't remember what setting I used for this, but I use a medium tightness. I don't want it too loose and I don't want it too tight that it's bunching and just looks weird in photos. Jumping ahead several steps into the future because I completely forgot to film myself doing the bodice, which is essentially the same process as doing the underpants, except it's a little bit different. Anyways, here I am hand stitching the top of the shoulder pieces so they sit a little bit nicer. You don't have to do this, but sometimes I like to hand stitch things down so it just looks a little bit neater. Now it's time for the most exciting and also most stressful part, which is finishing the dress, and that is putting the top of the bodice to the pants together. So at this point, the sleeves are attached to the bodice, I do believe, and the skirt is attached to the pant, and now we're just putting those pieces together. What you didn't see before this is that I actually already did that, but I haven't serged the edges, so I took a very wide zigzag stitch that's very loose. I don't even think I backstitched on it, and that's just going to hold everything together and make it easier to thread it through the serger. As you can tell, it's a bit of a stressful process, mostly because the serger is old, likes to act up, and things will get jammed in the machine if I don't do it quite right. So now that that's finished, we're done with serging it, but as I mentioned previously, I like to make my edges a little bit nicer and a little bit more durable, so I'm going to add another straight stitch and a little bit of a zigzag to any places that have frayed edging coming off of it. Just like that, we're done, and we have the very base of the dress complete. So now it is time to put it on the mannequin and make sure everything fits correctly before moving forward with the rhinestoning process. What I did not film before I started the rhinestoning process is that we had a fitting just to make sure everything fit a little bit, and we did have another fitting after that. That's completely normal. Sometimes with more unique designs, I find that it's easier to do a couple fittings to make sure it fits perfectly. And then after that, I went to the rhinestone store to pick up the last little bit I needed for the dress, and I started the rhinestoning process. The sketch from earlier is going to act as the blueprint for what the rhinestone pattern is essentially going to look like. It will not be a one-to-one replica, but it is going to help make sure that me and the client are on the same page as what it's somewhat going to look like when it's complete. It's also going to help me work a lot faster and know where I need to put certain items, but like I said, sometimes that changes. The dress turned out great. She got a lot of compliments and I'm super happy with it. So thank you so much for watching. If you stayed to the end, please like, subscribe, and let me know if you'd like to see more videos like this. I promise I will film every part of the process going forward. Anyways, thank you for watching and I will see you in the next video.